The world's looking for a COVID vaccine, and it looks like one may become available fairly soon. One of the key contenders is where the fly of the ointment comes in, because it was sourced back in the 1970s from an aborted baby girl. Is that a problem? Why is it a problem? Does the source of something matter if the end result is a good thing?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Whatever we decide to do about the vaccine, as I've thought about it, one thing we need to say is that it is complicated. Like so many ethical decisions, not everything is black and white. But we do live in a world in which the source of something increasingly matters to people. Have you noticed that? That it matters a lot whether your diamonds have been sourced from a place that uses diamonds as blood diamonds to fund a war, or whether you get fair trade coffee. There are issues which people care about that are to do with the source. So why not a vaccine? That's the question we're going to be looking at. Well, the race to find a COVID-19 vaccine is welcome, and there are many people, universities working hand in hand with industry to come up with a vaccine. But recently a concern was raised that the Oxford company, which is the front runner for finding a vaccine and which Australia is linking itself in with, has a cell source that links back to an aborted fetus. Now, the dilemma is this: can a good thing come from a bad source? If indeed people feel that it is bad to use a fetus that way, and many people wouldn't. But the concern was so great that it was raised by the Roman Catholic and the Anglican Archbishops of Sydney and the Orthodox Archbishop of Australia in a letter to the Australian Prime Minister, Scott Morrison. And they raised all sorts of questions which have been, I have to say, well put into the public square. Now, the cells themselves were not harvested recently for the purpose of the vaccine, nor was the abortion directly conducted to provide cells for vaccines. It all happened a long time ago, and it seems like there's a lot of steps away from the current vaccine. A vaccine could save many more lives than the one that was taken. What are the ethics around it? Have a watch of this news clip, and it will unpack some of those things.
Sydney church leaders have written to the Prime Minister to raise ethical concerns about a promising coronavirus vaccine. It comes after our government signed a letter of intent to secure the UK vaccine.
There's only one surefire way to end this pandemic.
The key to a post-COVID world has always been a vaccine. And there is hope.
But the Oxford University vaccine is being labelled as ethically tainted by Sydney's Catholic, Anglican and Greek Orthodox leaders because it's being developed from a kidney cell taken from a fetus that was aborted in the 1970s.
We need a vaccine for the coronavirus. Let me make that abundantly clear. Where abortion tissue is being used unethically, that is the concern that I have.
In a letter to the Prime Minister, the three men said they were disappointed to learn of the 167 candidate vaccines. The Commonwealth has chosen to throw its lot in with one that makes use of an electively aborted human fetus. We are as eager as anyone in the community to see life return to normal. But we do not want this to be achieved at the price of many good people's consciences.
I think that most people of faith would have an objection to this. If you don't take one life for another life just because you think it's going to save someone.
Vaccines for rubella, measles and smallpox are all produced the same way. The Vatican approves Catholics using them in the absence of viable alternatives.
The reality for vaccines is that they need cell cultures in order for us to grow them.
The PM is pushing on. If the Oxford vaccine is safe and works, it'll be available for all of us.
And it will be rolled out in accordance with expert medical advice.
Mark Burrows, 9 News.
Okay, Steve, that's fascinating. And I found, by the way, the article that you wrote, which I'm sure we will link to, was also very helpful on this, because this was actually a difficult one just to try and think through. And you put the questions really well. I'm just wondering what answers you've got. So would you take the vaccine?
A vaccine I would definitely take. Would I take that particular vaccine? I have not crunched it through in my mind fully enough to know. What I liked about what the Anglican Archbishop said, he wouldn't want to burden someone's conscience with this to say yes or no to this particular vaccine. I'd have a real problem if the vaccine was immediately sourced or completely sourced for this purpose. That would be a no for me. I'd rather go into isolation than that. That's what I'd say.
Okay. Broadening it, even just in terms of the vaccine and so on, it's an interesting point about taking the source of something into the background, like even the clothes that we wear or the medicines or whatever. Does it matter what the source is?
Well, there's the irony. In a world that is increasingly sort of hostile towards some of the Christian perspectives of the source of human life, source has become almost a marker of your rightness, in the sense of that you are moral. Your clothes, your shoes, your coffee. And even during COVID, everyone was very proud about the source of their sourdough bread having, you could use the yeast or the source a starter that it was 10 years old. And it's somehow a connection to the past. I can't see how you can now say this has no connection to something that was started back in the 70s. It clearly isn't completely connected, but there is a source going on there, if you see what I mean. So the end cannot justify the means in every ethical decision we make. Can it, Dave?
No, I don't think the end can justify the means. And I think the end justifying the means as a rule in our society is a disaster, if you think about it. But I also do think that it is very, very, very complex in different ways. And sometimes there's a balance. It's not as black and white. But, okay, let me put it this way. We've got ethical concerns about all sorts of source matters. Diamonds. I mean, I don't buy many diamonds, but I realize that in Perth you have loads. Clothing, and I'm not too bothered about that either.
No, we can see.
But obviously, no, actually, I am concerned where my clothes come from. I don't buy these fancy shirts that are done by slave labor.
No.
Coffee. No, where does coffee come from? I hadn't really thought about ethical coffee until I met an ethical coffee grower, and actually, he did make me change my mind.
Yes.
Don't you think we can be concerned about both what the product is, but also the source?
Yeah, I do. I would hate for someone to say, look, this coffee was sourced unethically, but gee, it's the best coffee in the world. With that, you couldn't sell coffee these days under that. And so I would hate to push this into a left and right or conservative and progressive perspective. I'd say we need the humility to say that we live in a society where lots of people have lots of concerns about ethical sources, so we need to listen to them. Mm-hmm. And so what I didn't like about some of the responses to the archbishops was, oh, that's just religious dogma. No, that's not. Lots of people, even who aren't religious, are concerned about the source of something such as this fetus being used for a vaccine, because it does raise questions about the dignity and value and worth of every human and what their end and goal is if it's just to serve other people. And I think you'd want to be careful with that one. Having said that, I think it's complex and complicated, and it's not pushing me towards the anti-vaccine perspective at all.
No, I'm probably anti-vaccine just because I don't like needles. No, I'll probably take the vaccine. If it's been, I don't like the idea of a rush vaccine. If it's been tested, if it's safe. Mm-hmm. I do think it's now unnecessary to use aborted fetuses and so on, because stem cell has developed way, way, way beyond that, which is good. Mm-hmm. But I do think there are still complexities in sourcing things. And it's interesting you mentioned that. I think you're much more likely to get concerns from vegans than you are from a lot of religious people, in the sense of we can't have anything that's animal.
That's right.
So, but what do you say? I mean, when I first heard this being debated, I thought, oh no, here we go again. It's just going to be reasonable scientists saving lives on one hand and religious nutcases on the other. But actually, the way that this was discussed, I thought it was actually a pretty reasonable discussion.
Yeah, so did I. I mean, it's not as if hospitals don't have ethical, centres within them to discuss these major things. Yeah. It's not as if scientists aren't. They're not some robotic people. There's ethics around science, and you know that if you're trying to put through a proposal for a PhD or something in a scientific field, you've got to deal with the ethics of the situation. So we, as Christians, want ethics to be central to our discussions, don't we?
We do, and I was quite heartened actually by the response to the Archbishop's letter, which was taken seriously and which wasn't making dogmatic statements; it was questioning, which I thought was really, really good.
Yeah.
So, I mean, well, I think it's good that people take, inverted commas, religious concerns. I think all moral concerns are philosophical religious concerns anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that these need to be taken seriously and need to be dealt with rationally, and ultimately, I think, need to be dealt with biblically. But thank you again for your article, because I do want to praise you for it, because I thought it was just a really, 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 really good article. That's why we're discussing this.
Yeah. And we can link it below as well, because it'll raise some of those other issues.
Yeah, that's true. And I guess what we're saying to people is, look, we need to stop and think about these things. A lot of ethical situations are complex in a fallen world, but unless we're looking to an absolute law, then I think we're just going to really, really, really struggle. So, Steve, thank you. I'm going to love you and say goodbye. You will tell us anything else that we can do before we head for next week, which is, by the way, going to be looking at the law.
The law, that'll be interesting. Well, it'll deal with some ethical decisions as well. But I think ethical decisions, to sum it up, are there all of the time. We're always making them, and we don't think about what we need to decide until it's upon us. I think as a society, it's a good thing to think, let's put some time to think about ethics before they happen, before we have to pull the trigger, I suppose, or pull the lever. It's worth thinking through your ethical framework before the issue comes up. Until we talk about the law next week, we'll see you later. See you, Dave.
See you.